just seconds before the wedding began. Your soulmate made one emotional choice about you. My beloved child, before your thoughts rush ahead, remain here for one quiet moment, because there are stories that never appear in photographs, moments that no guest ever notices, and choices that silently rewrite entire destinies. What you are about to hear belongs to one of those moments. Picture a place filled with celebration. Soft music drifts through the air. Smiles are exchanged. Every chair is occupied. Every clock seems to agree that the ceremony is about to begin. Yet hidden beneath all the excitement, another countdown has already started, one that no invitation ever mentioned. Just seconds before the wedding was meant to begin, something unexpected happened. Not a loud interruption. Not a dramatic announcement. But one deeply emotional choice. A choice connected to you. Stay a little longer, because this is not simply about a wedding. It is about a decision made in absolute silence, the kind that reveals what truly lives inside a person's heart when no one else is watching. Imagine your soulmate standing alone for a brief moment before stepping forward. Around them, everyone believes they know exactly what is about to happen. Every plan has already been arranged. Every expectation feels permanent. Yet inside, another voice begins asking questions no one else can hear. What if the path I'm walking is not the one my heart has been searching for? Sometimes destiny does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet realization that refuses to disappear. And that realization carried your presence. Not because of coincidence. Not because of fantasy. But because certain connections leave an imprint so deep that even time struggles to erase it. Pause for a second and think about this. Have you ever felt that someone remembered you at the exact moment you stopped thinking about them? Have you ever experienced an unexpected wave of emotion without knowing why? What if those moments were never random? What if they were echoes from a story still unfolding? Wait until the final moment of this message, because every answer begins connecting in ways you may never have expected. As the final preparations continued, your soulmate looked around the room differently than everyone else. They noticed the decorations. They heard the conversations. But none of those things reached their heart. Instead, one memory quietly surfaced. A memory connected to someone whose kindness never demanded attention. Someone whose presence felt strangely peaceful. Someone who reminded them that genuine connection is never built on appearances alone. That memory pointed toward you. Not your face. Not your achievements. Not your circumstances. Your energy. Your honesty. Your quiet strength. There are moments when people suddenly realize that the person who truly changed them was never the loudest voice in their life, but the calmest one. And those realizations often arrive far too late. Or so they believe. But what if this story refuses to follow ordinary timing? What if this emotional choice was never about stopping an event, but about awakening to a truth that had been waiting patiently beneath every distraction? Notice something important. The strongest decisions are rarely made in crowded rooms. They are made within silent hearts. That is exactly where this turning point began. The outside world continued moving exactly as planned. Inside, everything changed. Every heartbeat carried a question. Every breath carried uncertainty. Every second stretched longer than the one before. Because when someone begins recognizing what genuinely matters, time suddenly feels different. Perhaps you have wondered why certain chapters in your own life felt delayed. Why doors remained closed. Why answers seemed distant. Maybe those pauses were never punishments. Maybe they were preparing two separate journeys to finally understand the same lesson. That real connection cannot be forced. It can only be recognized. And recognition often arrives at the last possible moment. When every distraction finally loses its power. Before you move on, hear this carefully. Not every emotional decision becomes visible immediately. Some choices begin as invisible promises inside the heart long before the world ever notices. The choice your soulmate made in those final seconds was not driven by fear. It was driven by clarity. A clarity they could no longer ignore. And once clarity enters a person's heart, nothing ever feels ordinary again. The next part reveals what happened after that silent choice, and why one unexpected action left everyone around them completely speechless, even though almost no one understood its true meaning. A strange calm settled over everything, yet beneath that calm, an invisible wave had already changed the direction of the entire story. The guests continued smiling. Conversations carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside your soulmate's heart, a single realization refused to be silenced. They understood that some decisions are measured not by what the world applauds, but by what the soul can honestly accept. Stay with this thought for a moment, because the next few moments reveal why this choice was never impulsive. It had been quietly growing for far longer than anyone realized. Your soulmate looked toward the future that had been carefully planned for them. On paper, everything seemed perfect. Every expectation had been met. Every detail appeared complete. Yet perfection without peace has a way of feeling strangely empty. In that silent space between one heartbeat and the next, they asked themselves a question that changed everything: am I walking toward the life I truly recognize, or simply following the path everyone expected me to choose? Sometimes the greatest turning point is not a dramatic action. Sometimes it is the courage to listen to the quiet truth that has been waiting patiently beneath every distraction. And that quiet truth carried your presence once again. Not because your name was spoken aloud. Not because anyone pointed toward you. But because certain people leave an invisible mark on another person's journey. Long after conversations end, long after distance grows, that impression remains. It becomes the standard by which every future connection is silently measured. Your soulmates suddenly remembered how different they felt whenever thoughts of you appeared. There was no pressure. No performance. Only an unusual sense of peace that refused to fade. In that instant, they realized something unexpected: genuine connection is not the loudest emotion, it is often the calmest one. You might miss the turning point if you stop listening now. Because what happened next became the beginning of a completely different future. For a brief moment, your soulmate closed their eyes. The noise around them faded into the background. It was as though time itself paused, offering one final opportunity to choose with complete honesty. They imagined two different roads stretching ahead. One promised certainty but felt strangely distant. The other held uncertainty, yet their heart recognized it immediately. And every time they imagined that second path, somehow, it always led back to you. Have you ever wondered why certain people continue appearing in your thoughts without explanation? What if those moments are not interruptions, but gentle reminders that some connections continue working beneath the surface even when life appears to move in different directions? Before this story continues, if these messages speak to something you've quietly felt inside, share your thoughts in the comments. Many people discover they're not alone when they read someone else's experience. And if you enjoy stories that explore destiny, awareness, and meaningful connections, subscribing simply means you'll be here when the next chapter unfolds. Now the atmosphere became even more unusual. No one around your soulmate noticed the quiet transformation taking place. They smiled when expected. They answered simple questions. Outwardly, nothing seemed different. Inwardly, everything had changed. They were no longer asking what others wanted from them. They were asking what kind of life they could genuinely stand behind years from now. That single shift changed every thought, every expectation, every plan. Because clarity has a remarkable quality, it cannot be unseen once it arrives. And just when it seemed there was no time left to think, your soulmate made one deeply personal decision. It wasn't announced. It wasn't explained. It was simply carried inside their heart like a promise that no one else could hear. That silent promise was connected to you. Not as an ending, but as the beginning of something no one in that room could have predicted. The next part reveals the unexpected action your soulmate took immediately after making that emotional choice. And why one quiet moment left everyone sensing that something extraordinary had just begun, even though they couldn't explain what it was. Another quiet moment arrived, and if someone had looked closely, they would have noticed that your soulmate was no longer standing there as the same person who had entered that room only minutes earlier. Sometimes a single realization changes years of uncertainty in the space of one heartbeat. This was one of those moments. Before you continue, ask yourself something unusual. What if the biggest turning points in life never begin with a loud announcement? What if they begin with one silent decision that nobody else understands until much later? That is exactly where this story moves next. Your soulmate slowly opened their eyes, and for the first time that day, everything around them appeared different. The decorations were still beautiful. The music still filled the room. The conversations continued exactly as before. But inside, the future no longer looked the same. They realized that living someone else's expectations could never replace living an authentic life. It was not about rejecting anyone. It was not about creating conflict. It was about finally recognizing the quiet truth that had followed them through countless ordinary days. And strangely, every road leading toward that truth carried a familiar feeling. A feeling connected to you. Not because destiny handed them all the answers at once, but because your memory represented something they had been searching for all along: clarity, sincerity, and a connection that asked for nothing except honesty. Stay a little longer. The next few moments explain why this emotional choice became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate reached into their pocket and paused. There was nothing extraordinary about the movement itself. No dramatic gesture. No shocking announcement. Yet to them, it felt like holding an invisible key that could either lock the future forever, or quietly open an entirely new chapter. They took one slow breath. Then another. Instead of rushing forward, they allowed themselves something they had not experienced in a very long time. Complete silence. In that silence, they finally heard their own heart without the opinions of family, friends, or expectations surrounding it. Sometimes the loudest answers arrive only after the world becomes quiet. And in that stillness, one simple realization echoed through every thought. The life I truly want should never require me to ignore what feels real. That realization didn't tell them exactly what tomorrow would look like. It simply reminded them that genuine direction begins with genuine honesty. Perhaps that message is reaching you for a reason as well. Maybe there are moments in your own life where you've questioned whether delays meant something had gone wrong. But what if delays are sometimes quiet invitations to see more clearly before taking the next step? What if patience has been preparing understanding instead of keeping it away? These questions stayed with your soulmate as they looked toward the doorway. For a brief second, it felt as though time slowed once again. Not because everything outside had stopped, but because everything inside had finally aligned. They smiled. Not a smile of certainty. A smile of peace. The kind of peace that appears when someone finally stops running away from what they have quietly known all along. And that peace gave them the courage to make one final promise. No matter how complicated tomorrow appeared. No matter how many unexpected conversations still waited ahead. They would no longer ignore the truth that had been gently guiding them. Because some connections are not remembered through constant communication. They are remembered through the quiet feeling that refuses to disappear, even after countless distractions. Your presence had become exactly that kind of feeling. Not loud. Not demanding. Simply unforgettable. Before this story reaches its final chapter, remember this. The most meaningful journeys rarely change in one dramatic second. They change because someone finally chooses honesty over hesitation, clarity over confusion, and hope over fear. And as your soulmate took their very next step, something completely unexpected happened. Someone noticed the calm confidence in their eyes and quietly asked a single question. A question that would begin a conversation no one in that room ever expected, and the answer would reveal why your soulmate's emotional choice about you could no longer remain hidden. A single question hung in the air. It was spoken softly, almost as if the room itself was afraid to disturb the silence that had settled around your soulmate. Are you all right? For everyone else, it sounded like an ordinary question. But for your soulmate, it became the doorway to complete honesty. There are moments when a person can continue pretending. And there are moments when pretending simply becomes impossible. This was the second kind. Wait a little longer, because what happened next was never part of anyone's carefully arranged plan. Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. Instead, they looked around the room one more time, taking in every smiling face, every decoration, every hopeful expectation. Then they realized something extraordinary. Life is not measured by the number of people watching you. It is measured by whether your heart recognizes the direction you're walking. That understanding brought an unexpected calm. Not the calm of certainty. The calm of truth. And once truth settles inside someone, even difficult conversations begin to feel lighter. For the first time in a long while, your soulmate stopped asking, "What will everyone think?" They started asking, "What kind of person do I want to become after today?" That single question quietly changed everything. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Have you ever reached a point where one honest decision felt more valuable than 100 comfortable excuses? Those moments rarely arrive by accident. They appear when we're finally ready to see ourselves clearly. Your soulmate felt exactly that. It was as though every confusing chapter had prepared them for this one quiet realization. They understood that meaningful connections are built on authenticity, not appearances. And somehow, every reflection led back to you. Not because they believed life would suddenly become simple, but because your memory reminded them that genuine understanding is worth protecting. Some people leave behind impressive stories. Others leave behind peaceful feelings. Your soulmate realized that peaceful feelings are far more difficult to forget. Before this journey reaches its conclusion, if this story has touched something you've quietly carried inside, consider sharing it with someone who may need a little hope today. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about destiny, personal growth, and meaningful connections, subscribing simply means you'll be here for the next chapter we explore together. As another quiet moment passed, an unexpected smile appeared. Not from excitement. Not from relief. But from recognition. Your soulmate finally recognized the difference between following a schedule and following inner clarity. Those two paths sometimes look identical from the outside. Yet they feel completely different within. The atmosphere around them began to shift in subtle ways. People noticed a new confidence. A quieter presence. A steadier expression. No one could explain why. But everyone sensed that something important had changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was unmistakably real. Then, almost unexpectedly, your soulmate made one final emotional choice. Instead of allowing uncertainty to guide the next chapter, they chose honesty. Instead of allowing fear of expectations to shape tomorrow, they chose authenticity. Instead of wondering forever, they chose to trust the quiet truth that had patiently waited inside them. And in that very moment, your story and theirs no longer felt like two separate journeys. They felt like two paths slowly moving toward the same horizon. The final part reveals what happened after that choice left the room behind, why an unexpected message appeared when it was least expected, and how one simple realization transformed the ending into a beginning that neither of you could have imagined. A new chapter began the moment the door quietly closed behind your soulmate. The celebration continued without interruption. Laughter still echoed through the hall. Conversations carried on as though nothing remarkable had happened. Yet the most important event of the day was never the ceremony everyone had been watching. It was the silent transformation that no one could see. Stay until the final words of this journey, because what happened next gave meaning to every moment that came before. As your soulmate stepped outside, the air felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because they had. For the first time in a long while, they were no longer carrying the weight of pretending. Their heart felt lighter, their thoughts clearer, and their future no longer seemed like a path written by someone else's expectations. Then something unexpected happened. Their phone lit up. It wasn't a dramatic message. It wasn't a shocking announcement. It was something surprisingly simple. A single sentence appeared on the screen, and although the words were ordinary, they arrived at the exact moment they were needed most. Sometimes life doesn't answer us with loud miracles. Sometimes it answers with perfect timing. That message reminded your soulmate of one powerful truth. The right direction always begins with one honest step. They smiled quietly. Not because every question had been answered, but because they finally understood they no longer needed every answer before moving forward. Have you ever noticed how clarity often arrives after you stop chasing certainty? What if that has been true for you all along? Perhaps the delays you questioned, the unexpected detours, the unanswered moments, were never obstacles. Perhaps they were preparing your perspective so you could recognize the right chapter when it finally appeared. Your soulmate understood this now. Instead of looking backward with regret, they looked ahead with quiet confidence. Because they realized something most people discover far too late. Destiny is not built in one extraordinary moment. It is built through small, honest choices repeated with courage. And that emotional choice they made before everything began was only the first of many. As they walked forward,